Hey, it's freaking Grant from the Brilyant Heathanz podcast. How you doing,
Oh,
Grant?
for you?
Interesting day. Try to get contacts just fitted for my eyes and punch myself in the eyes enough today that I don't really want to try it again today.
It takes practice.
Yes, and I'll probably jump into YouTube and try to find better videos on how to do it because the way I was doing it just wasn't working. So,
What were you? You know, it's fun because I've been using contacts for 20 something years now. What what did they show? How did they show you how to do it at the eye doctor's office?
it was like put on your finger and then pull down in this eye and then kind of lift with the other, and then pop it in, which didn't work for me. And then I was trying to like use this
Yeah.
hand to open it up.
Well, you're basically touching your eye, which is weird until
Yes.
you've done it a couple times. The other thing is make sure your fingers dry.
Right.
Get any excess fluid off the contact because it'll be sticky. It'll stick to your finger. So that's the tough part. And then don't lean your head in, lean your head back.
Oh,
So
I was leaning my head in.
I kind of do this. I put it on my finger and I do almost one motion. I kind of do a here and I touch my eye so that it sticks to the eye, the context.
Yeah.
And then when I feel it touch the eye, I kind of start to blink a little bit, which then gets it caught behind the eyelid. So when you pull away, your finger's not pulling the contact with you.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so try that. But it just takes practice. Like I can do it in my sleep now. It just takes practice. I'll tell you what's the bigger pain in the butt is taking them back out.
Yeah. I had no
Uh,
problem with that for some
okay.
reason. I got it out the first time.
Oh, good,
Just putting them
good.
in.
Yeah. To me, it's more annoying taking them out at this point than putting them in.
Yeah. No. My eyes hurt from punching them so much with my
Yeah,
fingers. So,
yeah.
all right. So tonight's topic is social contract. And you want to jump into that?
Well, it's interesting. I heard the term. It's a term that I, I think with the death of civics classes in America, civics is really not taught. You get some places where you get some social studies classes taught, and social studies is such a general topic that could mean history, political science, economics, all kinds of different things can get wrapped into social studies, including civics. There was a point in time where social studies classes meant you got history and civics and some kind of law or political science. Political science, by the way, is just basically pre-law. It's a study of law. Um, so you would get a lot of that stuff definitely middle school through high school, but even in grade school. And I know for years that's kind of gone away. And I know in
Yeah.
a lot of places that school funding gets cut. Some of the first programs that get cut are social studies programs, and it's always hilarious to me because a lot of the people that have the biggest mouths, especially on social media, are like, "Why are we not teaching kids how to do their taxes? Why are we not teaching kids how to balance a checkbook and all these practical things?" And it's like I think they want math and science funded, and I think they think that stuff is taught in like math class. It's a social studies class, like, but they're the
Right.
first one. We don't need to teach that, or I don't want to. I don't want kids to learn. My kids learn social studies because it's the social studies of the Republicans or
Whatever. Yeah.
these other Democrats, or so just teach them the stuff that can't be interpreted. It's just black and white math and science. Well, you're losing all the foundational stuff that teaches people how to be part of a culture. And this is where the idea of a social contract comes in. Social contract is going to differ from culture to culture, um, and a lot of it comes from historical perspective, shared background, shared cultural beliefs, all these kind of things, kind of all boiled together in like a big pot of gumbo, and it creates this social contract. And like I said, I started hearing this get kind of bandied about batted around during like the COVID stuff, where a lot of
Right.
people were saying, getting the vaccine and protecting your fellow Americans or your fellow people as part of the social contract, and then you have people saying, I didn't, I didn't sign up for a social contract. I didn't sign any papers, and it's all this talk, people bludgeoning each other over the head with this idea of what a social contract is. And I was just in a discussion with someone a couple of weeks ago, and they brought it up just out of nowhere. I was bringing up, like, I think we were talking about a topic, and I kind of gave them, when I debate, I often usually ask questions. I usually wait for the person to say something, and I just ask questions based on what they say. Like, I try not to go like where I slam people. I've done that in the past where I was more aggressive and younger. I would just like, no, this is right. And I would just hit people with facts. And I don't do it anymore. I let people kind of fall into their own traps by just asking questions based on what they're asking. And this guy kind of realized he had said stuff that he didn't actually understand and didn't have the answers for. He was just spouting off what a talking head had said. And he randomly just went to a rant about social contracts. And I was like, dude, do you know what that means? Because the way you're talking about it, like, you have no clue what that even means. And it just kind of, it gave me such a, like, just a bad taste from, again, all those arguments back during the pandemic lockdown about social contract. And even before that, where it's come up at different times, where people just don't understand what it means. And I really think it's a good discussion.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, if we're talking about history, one of the first social contracts was the Ten Commandments. You know, thou shalt not steal, thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery. You know, I mean, just basic humanly, I guess just how to be a better person, and I guess some type of structure in a way.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny, because the guy I was talking with, he's a Christian, and I brought that up. But and I brought it up. I said, it's all the. I said there are three huge groups, the three primary groups that the three groups that primarily populate the planet, which would be Muslims, Christians, and Jews. If you combine all the populations, all believe in basically the same social contract, because they all are Abrahamic religions, so they all come from Abraham. Abraham is, the Ten Commandments are from Moses, but Moses again was a follower of Abraham, and et cetera, et cetera. I think all three, believe in Moses. But what's really interesting about that, and like you say, it's one of the first, and I would even argue that it's not one of the first. It's one of the first that people think of, and it's
Right.
one of the oldest that people think of. But I think people forget that even Judaism, as old as it is, and it's far older than Islam or Christianity. Islam and Christianity are very young religions in the grand scheme of things. But Judaism is younger than some of the other religions that exist in the world. Like, every religion has some structure and some guiding principles, and that would be a social contract for the
Right.
society at the time. So, that being said, even with that being said, Moses said, according to, if we take out the religious context and just say, the religious context, Moses went up on the mountain, spoke to a burning bush, and he was given the Ten Commandments, and
Yeah.
it's, there's all this, and people really wholeheartedly believe that. So I'm not knocking what they believe, but at the same time, let's make it secular just for the sake of this argument. Moses came from the religion of the pharaohs of Egypt, and you look at the ancient Egyptian religion, which is older than Judaism, or at least as old, if probably older than Judaism. Um, there's a lot of evidence, and this is a separate discussion, but just real quick, there's a lot of evidence that even the Old Testament, I mean, not even that the Old Testament books of the Bible themselves were taken out of the Sumerian Enuma Elish, and the Babylonian books, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, and all these other books. Like, it's just a collection of almost like a Reader's Digest synopsis of other books of more ancient religions. And there's evidence that even those ancient religions themselves borrow from religions that came before them. Like, all societies built up on the graves of the societies that have come before them. So Moses basically took Egyptian law, and said, "Hey, how do I boil this down so it doesn't sound like it came from Pharaoh? It sounds like it might have come from a God that these people want to believe in, so that I can keep them in line while we're being nomadic in this desert environment, where we gotta people got to respect each other's belongings and their whatever livestock we got roaming with us, and we can't be out here cheating with each other's wives because now we're mixing
Right.
blood, and we're going to get all kinds of like all these things. Even the dietary laws make sense in terms of if you're a nomadic culture, or even a culture that hasn't really the dietary laws that come from the book of is it Deuteronomy? I think it's Deuteronomy. No, that's Leviticus, the book of Leviticus. So where you don't eat pork, you don't eat shellfish. That makes sense if you're living in a culture where you don't have refrigeration, you don't know serve meat, you don't understand how to prevent foodborne illness and all these different things. Like, so just religion gives a context because that's in a lot of cases the guiding principles for a society at any given time. But if you just look at them even secularly, they make sense in terms of everybody's going to agree to this because it's going to keep us from killing each other. It's going to keep us from hurting it. No adultery means some guy's not looking to kill me because he thinks I slept with his wife, or whatever. Like all these things, all these negative things that come about from people breaking this generally agreed upon set of rules. It prevents us from it allows us to have a trusting, cohesive society where everybody's kind of working on the same page, which is what you need, whether it's ancient times or modern times. You need everybody to kind of agree, and then it gets more complex as society gets more complex, which makes sense. Like the founding principles of the Constitution made perfect sense when we didn't have cars and planes, and and you have to. People are like, oh, let's go back to the founders' Constitution. Well, there are amendments. We got to repeal all the amendments except for the ones the founders gave us. Well, some of those amendments allow us to regulate things like traffic. And
Yeah.
I mean, like
I was about to say we almost need another new social contract. Thou shall not pass, on a red light. Like just the way that people actually drive today. Thou shall not shoot somebody for look at them wrong. Like just all the.
That is, thou shalt not kill. Like, that's it. If people, I even say it's really simple. It's really simple, and it's most scholars believe that Jesus probably was a real person. Now, how much of the biblical stuff was real, it's again highly debatable, depending, and a lot of that's just faith and dogma and what you believe. But Jesus gave us what is called the golden rule, where he was like, he basically said, look at the laws in Leviticus. And what happened was, after Leviticus, and the laws in Leviticus, it's a whole book of laws, right? And a lot of our modern law is still based on that. But even that was based on like the Babylonian Hammurabi's law and all, like, again, more ancient stuff. But a lot of modern stuff is even based in Leviticus because it's laws. But the Leviticus took the Ten Commandments and expanded it. And then later on, that was expanded more. And Jesus at some point said, we're basically giving into what's called legalism, where we're looking for ways to make the laws finer and finer so that we can basically find more ways to prosecute people and fine people and make money from people, to have control over people. In a lot of ways, it became what we would now call fascism, right? It became this really authoritarian government, but it was so the people in charge could stay in charge, make money, and have power over everybody. And he said, forget all that. Let's just boil it down. This is where everybody's going wrong. The whole of the law hangs on this. Love your neighbor as yourself. Love God above all, whatever you call God. Love your neighbor above all. Love your neighbor as you love yourself. And if you think about it,
treat people as you would like them to treat you. Yes.
Yeah, like that's it, dude. Like if people just did that, if people stopped thought every time before they did something, would I want somebody to do this to me? That is the epitome of a social contract. That's it.
Yeah.
It's really that simple. And that can, even when you go into like the COVID stuff, right? It was so ridiculous because if people go, okay, people were saying it's my, I remember this is where I was always one of the people who was like, I'll get vaccinated. I don't care. I had to get vaccinated for work anyway. It's fine. If you don't want to get vaccinated, it's your body. But it's your body, your choice. It's fine. But it's my choice if I don't want to be around you. It's my choice if I don't want my kids around you, I want my grandfather around you, blah, 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 blah. Like it's other people's choice to not necessarily want to be around you if they feel like they're threatened by you. And again, that's another topic, another debate. But people have the right to say, I don't want somebody in my private business that's not vaccinated or not masked. I don't want somebody in my house that's not one of those things. I don't want my kids to go over to a house of someone who of a family that's not vaccinated or doesn't wear masks. Like just as much as your right to not get vaccinated or wear a mask. Like it has to go both ways. And I remember like people saying they wanted people who weren't vaccinated to be in prisons or in camps, which was hyperbolic on one.
Insane. Yeah.
But there were also people who weren't vaccinated and refused to wear a mask, who were going out in public and coughing on people who were wearing masks and pulling their masks down and sneezing on them and doing things to like
Being an asshole. Yeah.
Yeah, like both of this is so out, like it's
Yeah.
so beyond the realm of what is normal and safe and respectful in the society. Like you don't have to get vaccinated, but you don't have the right to try to infect me because you think it's better for me. Like, what is that nonsense? Or because
Yeah.
you're mad at me for choosing to do what I want to do with myself. Like that's and you don't have the right to tell somebody they need to be rounded up and put in a camp because you don't like that they made a choice. Like there are ways that we could have navigated this without society falling apart. And now we're society in America has kind of fallen apart. And it's so insane to me where things are and still are. People are still doing that stuff.
Yeah. But I mean, unfortunately, I feel like society has, I would say over the past, and we kind of talked about this before, it's just continuously gotten worse and worse. And I think it also goes back to just the lack of respect for one another. Like, I think a lot of people grew up with respect. If you did something wrong, your neighbor might beat your ass, and then when you got home and your parents found out, they beat your ass. And like, but there was always a respect, like, hold the door, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
just, and it just seems like that people today are not taught respect, or they see that their parents are out of control and completely disrespectful and don't care about anybody. So of course that's how they're raised and that's how they grow up.
Yeah. I think there's something to that. I think it's a deeper systemic issue. I think it's a deeper societal issue. And I say that because um I I say that because I think part of the problem is a lot of people, and it goes back to I think our first show. Um, People are so angry at the state of the world, and they don't
Yep.
know what to be angry at, and they feel so disenfranchised and treated so unfairly. Why am they're doing the woe is me, the why me? Why am I broke? Why am I poor? Why don't I have food or good health, access to healthcare, access to clean water? Why don't I have these things? Why do I get to? I'm allowed to, I can go on the internet and see all these people living this life, which is all made up. And social
Yep.
media has been such a cancer, it's so toxic. But people see that and they're like, I don't even want to be rich. I just want what I feel is my fair share, right? Whatever. And for everybody, that's a different number.
Yeah.
That's a different thing. So people get angry, and the anger goes to, I'm going to not hold the door. I don't need to respect anybody else. It's just me against the world. I'm gonna be, as mean and hard and tough and whatever and disrespectful and nasty because I'm so angry and hurting and sad and depressed that I've done enough of beating myself up internally in here that I'm going to take it out on somebody else. And there's a lot of that. I think a
Yeah.
lot of who are angry, they want things, they don't know why they can't have them. They feel like working hard is not the answer. Um, and they feel like they need to get back at somebody, or they just need to go out and get their piece of the pie, however they have to do it.
Yeah.
Some thugs, robbing and stealing, whatever. Like so you have that, and I think that's a big part of it. I don't think it's necessarily they weren't raised with respect. I think And honestly, I think a lot of it has started happening badly. You know, you saw a lot of the drug stuff, same thing. And our generation, Generation X, has a huge responsibility. And it's really funny because Generation X always jokes about, well, we're the generation that came out pretty unscathed between the boomers and Gen
Yeah.
Z. But at the same time, it's like the people in Generation X that are stable are generally very stable and doing pretty well. And the people who are not, that most people don't hear about, are generally not doing really well at all. Like it's,
Right.
um, but that's not what's really talked about. Everybody talks about the people who are pretty much doing well. Um, but that our generation has now raised this younger generation, these, I would say, 12 to 30 year olds, you know, it's maybe a little older, that are not doing really well,
Yeah.
that are out there because they saw the members of our generation who weren't doing well, who got angry, who felt beaten down, who talked badly about the system, who said they deserve more, and who maybe even themselves, because we've seen there's a lot of people our age are out there doing the shoplifting and all this stuff. Um,
Yep.
their kids are seeing that, you know, and it's so I think our generation is part of that. And but again, honestly, this goes back to like it's a discussion, and this is where you get into this is really where I kind of want to have a little bit of a I don't know about a debate, but a discussion, because I think this is where you get the Bernie Bros, right? You get the people who in the baby boomer generation and prior, but definitely the baby boomer generation. I'm not going to ever deny that they didn't work, but it's like the baby boomer generation takes a lot of credit for the generation that went to World War II in Korea.
Yeah.
And they almost act as if they're part of that generation, like they were the brave heroes. And they fought in Vietnam. I get that, but Vietnam wasn't really a good war. And when you
Right.
dig what happened, how we got into Vietnam, Ho Chi Minh. A lot of people don't know this. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you something. If you're not aware, most people in America are not aware of this. Ho Chi Minh, who was the leader of the Viet Cong, actually asked America, "Can you help me?" The people want to overthrow Dien, who was backed by America.
Yeah.
And he went to the American government and said, "We've written a constitution. The Viet Cong, the communists, wrote a
Yeah.
constitution that was based on our constitution. We want to take. We just want to supplant Dien." And you know, but Dien was backed by the French, and he was backed by the Americans, and he was backed by the Western powers, and he was backed by the war profiteers, the Bell helicopters, and you know, Boeing, and all the companies at the time that were selling weapons and stuff, um, and the American government said no, we're going to support Dien. So he then turned because he needed weapons because he wanted to fight the
Yeah.
French. So he then turned to the Soviets and the Chinese to get communist weapons. That's what happened. But originally, the Viet Cong wanted to rebel and install a Western style government, but they couldn't get backing from the US. So they switched
Right.
sides. So that war, when you really dig into that war, that was just a bad war. Different discussion, like I said.
Yeah.
But the baby boomer generation, they got the privilege of were there times where there was some inflation and you know, we had, you know, there was the gas shortage and some of these other things, but generally college was either free or really cheap for them, like incredibly.
Yes.
Um,
Yeah.
what I
You could from you could work a part-time job for most decent colleges
yep,
and pay your college
yep.
tuition.
You could buy
You
a
can't do
house.
that now. Yeah.
I talked to my dad recently, and we don't talk a lot, but we talked recently. And while I was talking, he went on a rant about raising minimum wage, and I said, you know, when minimum wage was created during your lifetime, when it was
Yeah.
created, I said it was originally created and it was written into the legislation. You go back and read the original legislation. Anybody watching, I challenge you to do that if you don't believe me. And I'm not some leftist hippie. I'm actually very much a centrist moderate. I'm trust me, I believe in statistics and facts. The original legislation was written that minimum wage was designed to be a living wage for people in the middle and lower class. Like,
Yeah.
so at the time, even though it's like, all right, it was only like $1 or something, you could live on like $2 or $3 an hour. Like that was good money back
Right.
then. You know, people don't get that. Like people that worked at GM jobs and retired with full benefits, they were seen as almost being rich. Like they
Yeah.
were upper middle class working a factory job on a line. Like getting a union job was good money, was like really good money.
Yeah.
So the minimum wage jobs actually paid you a living wage. And then at some point it decoupled from the dollar, and whereas inflation went out, really decoupled from inflation. As inflation increased, the minimum wage didn't increase at the same rate. If the minimum wage had stayed coupled to inflation, the inflation rate, minimum wage today would be like 30 something dollars. It'd be like 34, 33, $34 an hour right now. So when people are
Yeah.
like, we, $20 an hour, that's still not a living wage, but it's like, you can either repeal minimum wage and have everybody negotiate a salary. I mean, there's options, but to say that minimum wage should only be $7 or $8 an hour, or minimum wage jobs are for kids, people don't forget, like, there's a kids are not the bottom of the workforce. Like, if you look at the vast majority of the people that do the service jobs and the retail jobs and work in the warehouses and stuff, they're adults.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're adults, but they're not kids. They're not high school kids. Like, there are people who are trying to make ends meet, and then they're working 3, 4, 5 jobs. And then you have people who have 2, 3, sometimes 4 jobs,
Yeah.
have kids who they're not home with, and they're like, well, why aren't you raising your kids better? Well, because I'm
Because
working.
I have to work
Right?
3 jobs. Yeah.
Right. So there's all these things that play a part, and then that's where you get into the argument of, well, what does a social contract mean? And that's where you get the Bernie Sanders people saying, maybe we do need the benefits of a social democracy, where you have the kind of legislative look of a republic, but you're getting what some people would consider socialism. You're getting a wage that's set at a certain rate for everybody at this level. Everybody's not in non-technical, non-skilled job. You're getting a certain wage. You're getting free access to free housing, certain amount of free food, all these things. Maybe that's the way. But again, we don't know if that experiment works in a country the size of ours, or the
Right.
of ours. Like, so there's all these questions that go into that, but it's at some
I mean,
point.
it also depends where you
Yeah,
live too. I mean, if you are making $15-20 an hour and you live in San Francisco or New York, it ain't going to cut it.
no,
You
that's like a
know,
dollar here.
right? But if you, yeah, but if you live maybe somewhere in North Carolina, Florida, maybe you're
Alabama.
okay. Maybe you
Yeah.
can get, well, Florida actually has exploded, but
I'm
I
just saying, if
mean,
you were like in the
some places
bottom,
down south,
yeah,
yeah,
like Alabama, Mississippi, somewhere like
yeah, like
that.
that's probably a good wage,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
prices reflected there.
yeah, yeah. Or even middle of the country in Nebraska. So,
You think
somewhere
about
like,
it, like in the mid '90s, because I was looking at getting in the Philly Police Department and possibly the fire department, and the pay then was, I think, starting pay was like 32, maybe
yeah.
28 to 32.
And now it's what, 50?
It's more than that now.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's
yeah,
like mid to lower 50s. That's not including overtime, but that's basically going into training and everything else. But yeah,
yeah,
I mean, it's almost doubled, but if
right.
you think about it, housing at that point, you could buy a row house in Northeast Philadelphia for like 60-70 grand. That's
Less.
$210,000 right now.
Depending on where you're at, you could buy a
Yeah.
decent code for 60, 70. But yeah, yeah,
and
absolutely.
and that now is 4 times more than it was
Absolutely.
then. You
Yep.
think about your car back then was 12-14 grand. That car's 30
You got
forty
a
thousand
$15,000
dollars
car in the 90s. It was a nice car. It was a decent car.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you're spot on. But minimum wage hasn't really increased much since we were kids.
Nope.
So when people make those arguments, I'm like, you guys are so out of touch. And it's a stupid argument. It's a stupid argument. Like, it doesn't. I don't understand. You can't argue that people are out of control. At the same time, when people are telling you we can't afford to feed ourselves, like,
Yeah.
we can't afford heat in the winter. We can't. A lot of people have electric heating or gas, not electric heating, um, electric stoves or gas stoves.
Yeah.
You know what they do if they live in a place where they got to get oil for the winter or whatever? They'll run their oven in the winter.
I know people who did.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, we did that at a point.
Yeah.
Just being, yeah, like when I was a kid. Yeah. So that's not a way to live. But
No.
That's all. And when you tell people those stories, like, oh, that, that doesn't make sense. Or maybe if somebody had worked harder, it's like everybody had. I've had a job since I was 14 years old.
Yeah.
I've had a job every point in my life, at least every summer. But since I was probably 18, or I guess 19, 20, I've had a job. Period. You
Yeah.
know, the entirety of my life.
Well,
Like,
I mean, as a kid, I mean, the way to get around that, because I think I started my first job, other than throwing newspapers at like 12, was working at a pharmacy under the table, local pharmacy at like 14. And at that time, it was
yeah,
like 350 an hour under the table, and it was a job.
yeah, I know it in Delaware. It was you can get you can get your parents to sign off and getting your working papers at 14. So I had working
You
papers.
can now, yeah, in PA.
And then I think it was 16 in Delaware. It was 16. You didn't need working papers, but I wanted to. We didn't have any money. My mom was working two, sometimes three jobs. So I wanted to work, have my own money, and so yeah, I started pushing carts and bagging groceries at a Pathmark, which doesn't exist anymore. But
Right.
and I think I made 4.50 an hour, or something like that, $5 an hour, which was minimum wage back then. Um,
Well, that's a different perspective today. I mean, I grew up the same way. Like your parents have very little money or no money, so the only way you're going to get money or get what you want is working for it.
yep,
And I think that's why today most kids are spoiled because most of them don't want to get jobs. Like
yeah,
they just want to, and I think it also goes back to once again social media. Like they see these influencers and like oh that guy's makes $1 million. That's nothing. And I'm like, dude, do you know what $1 million is? Like, you know, most people don't have $1 million.
no.
It's and I that's another whole subject of what's wrong with everything today.
But what's crazy is, speaking of, I mean, just going right back to the wages and the inflation, and $1 million in the '90s, you could
Oh
live
my, yeah.
$1 million. There are people who are like, I made $1 million. I'm set for most of my life if I invest as well. Nowadays, $1 million is like 3, 4 years. It's gone.
Yeah, unless you live a certain lifestyle.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah, really modestly,
Yes.
and you invest it. But yeah, like $1 million, you can't live on $1 million anymore. Like, not for long. So, um, and we're not talking. I mean, we're talking, 20 years ago, basically,
Yeah.
30 years ago. Like, that's crazy. Like, that's and again, minimum wage has not changed hardly at all. Every time it's changed, it's been like, oh, we're gonna add a quarter. We're gonna add 50 cents. Like,
Yeah.
it's barely moved.
Well,
And that,
90, I think it was 94. I'm pretty sure it was 505, 515. And what is it? Double that today? It's maybe
I,
around 9 to 10 bucks.
yep, I think it was 5.15. And it's not $10. It's not. I don't think it's double digits right now. I think it's. I don't
It's
actually. I
still in the
think.
nines.
I don't. Are you sure it's not like 8.50?
Yeah, I want to look now.
Yeah, I know some places have raised it, but the federal, I think, is still like, uh, maybe $9. I'm not sure, but I don't think it's 10
No.
yet.
725.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah,
Wow. That's
I knew it was low.
crazy.
I knew it was low. Yeah, it's barely moved.
Oh my God. It's $2.10 more than it was in the 90s.
30
Jesus.
years ago, dude.
I mean,
That's criminal. That's criminal.
that is criminal. Yeah,
Yeah,
I agree. I mean, first off, there's nobody like my daughter works at an Annie Ann's and she makes without tips, she's making 11.25 an hour,
yeah.
but she's only getting 2 days a week. So I mean, 2 to 3 days a
Dude,
week.
there's a lot of people that are making that 7 something an hour, or eight bucks. I think the average is right around $8 or something. Like, that's why people are complaining. So when people are like, oh, you're lucky to make that as much money as you're making, it's like, what? Are you crazy? Like when I hear
Yeah,
people, when I hear, again, politicians or people who just parrot everything they say, make those arguments, I'm just like, dude, you have no idea.
dude.
Who
Well, I mean, the problem with politicians is most of these
they're out of touch.
career politicians are making 200 plus $1,000 a year. They don't pump their own gas. They don't do their own grocery shopping. Like they don't have a clue what it is to be an
Lifetime,
everyday person.
yeah, lifetime pension, insider trading. Oh, I know. That's what I'm saying. Like
Yeah.
it's disgusting that they make those arguments with a straight face and then tell people they need to be smarter about
How they
how
spend
they.
their money.
Also, I've heard, I can't tell you how many, and just because these are two guys who I hate, and their networks I absolutely despise. They're pretty much blatant racist, but like Charlie Kirk and Ben Shapiro and some of these guys I think Tucker's probably said this, Hannity's probably said this, the idea that when people are also like, we need, there's no reason to cut Social Security. Like, what are we going to retire on? And it's like, well, whatever money you're making, you got to figure out how to invest some of it for your future. And it's like, if I'm making eight something an hour, even if I'm
Yeah.
working two jobs and making $16, that's not enough to buy food, pay for somewhere to live, get to work, and then invest for my retirement. That's
Yeah.
just real. It's not even enough to do the first three things I said.
Right.
Consistently buy decent food, pay your rent, and get to work. Like that's, you don't have the money. Like you but they actually will make those arguments with a straight face about why Social Security needs to be cut or ended altogether.
Meanwhile, they're making no, I mean, granted, good for them. They're making millions of dollars
Yeah,
a year,
yeah. But
but
you can't talk down on other people because you're that out of touch.
yeah.
But again, it's the same thing as politicians when they get I get a lifetime pension, 200 or more grand a year, insider trading, any kickbacks that they're getting in secret for speeches and all these other things
Yes.
or whatever, and they're making $1 million a year probably when it's all said and done. Meanwhile, they'll say we're going to cut healthcare benefits and Social Security, and you're going to suck it up, or we're going to do this, or we're going to throw you. That's the right. On the left, we're going to up your Social Security benefits or whatever. We're going to up by 2%.
Well, I mean, just look at the past presidents and their families.
Yeah,
I mean, Bush already had money, but like the
yeah.
Clintons, I mean, they came out of the White House maybe a couple $100,000 in the bank. What 3 years later, they're worth over $100 million from speaking engagements, the
Mm-hmm.
Clinton Global Foundation,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just and that's all these
Al Gore.
politicians.
Al
If
Gore.
you lose, it's like okay, well, guess what? You're getting a cupcake job with some company that's been pumping you, with a bunch of money,
Or you,
or a lobbyist or
Al
whatever.
Gore. Al Gore founded all that climate stuff and went on speaking tours and um
Oh
same,
yeah.
obviously Bush and Cheney already rich with oil and bank money and stuff before, um but John Kerry's not
Oh
doing
yeah.
bad. You know,
Well, his
Mitt,
wife.
Mitt Romney was
Yeah.
fine when he was out of office before he got back into the Senate.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah,
Meanwhile, 90% of the rest of the country is struggling.
yeah, yeah.
It's screwed up.
And that's where the people were
And
like,
that's where the anger comes in.
yeah, and people are just like, yeah, I see you guys on TV living it up and telling me I don't deserve anything. Fuck you. I'm gonna go get whatever I want now. I'm not gonna care about anybody else. Like that's where a lot of that comes in. And then you go back to, so let's go back to the social contract. The topic is how much responsibility. We can talk about the rules that society should abide by, but people are less likely to abide by any rules and move more toward chaos and threatening and violence if they're not being taken care of. So at what point
Right.
does a contract also encompass taking care of your fellow society member? I think that's a good topic or a good thought for people to kind of hold and think on, coming out of this show. Like, whose responsibility is it? Is it? It's the old "Are you your brother's keeper?" kind of thing.
Yeah.
Like, do we have a responsibility to help one another? And what's that number? Is there a number? What's the percentage we're supposed to help somebody else? And that's a great debate because it's a tough topic. It's a tough topic to discuss.
I think you're responsible up to a point. I mean, if you see that's, if my brother is genuinely lazy and doesn't want to do anything and wants to sit at home and eat all day and drink soda and play video games and doesn't want to do anything. Meanwhile, I go to work, I come home, he's in the same position he was when I left for work. Like at that point, no, you're not responsible for them,
Yeah, yeah,
But if you have somebody who has issues and I mean, then yeah, I mean, that's where, it is sort of your job. It's a
it's tough.
fine line.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's tough. It's tough because then you got to make the call. Like, are they really sandbagging it, or is there something?
Right.
Maybe,
Or
maybe
something really wrong.
off the couch is there's something mentally wrong that nobody's paying attention to. So maybe there's something else they need. Maybe they don't actually need financial help, but they need some help, mental health wise, and physical health wise, and some of these other things that will then get them moving to help themselves. Like, and it's at some point, I think there is a point where society as a whole, we as a group, as a nation, as a culture, whatever you want to call it, have to step in and offer some assistance. But again, you're right. Like there is a point where there are people who are just taking advantage, who are just
Yep.
parasites, and you don't want to help them. And it's tough to say that person doesn't deserve to get it. Like it's because then it's like, well, and it should be plain to see. But there's always somebody that can argue. Well, maybe they, So it's an interesting debate. It's a tough debate.
I mean, listen, we all know people that know how to work the system,
Yep,
know every in and out
yep,
of the system, and but they also are the same people. They're working the system, but the way they live their lives. Like to me, like I don't really care what type of clothes I wear or sneakers I wear, but and like I my average cell phone lasts me probably 3 to 4 years.
yeah,
But
same here.
then you'll have people that are struggling and will bitch and moan, but they dress nicer than I do. They have newer phones than I do. They have the newest Apple, iPhone and
New,
everything else. And it's
yeah,
just like, dude, that's why you're broke because
yeah,
you're not, yeah.
yeah. I agree. Um, and that is what makes it hard because there are people who, even if they are working and they're working hard, but it's why can't I get ahead? It's not fair. And it's like, well, let's look at what you're doing with your money. But then who are we to decide or tell someone how to
Right.
manage? Like, and then that's where it's a really tough debate. Does society have a responsibility? We have a responsibility to all follow the same set of rules, but some people obviously are being disadvantaged because of the way the rules are set up.
Right.
Um, and then at what point, how far do we go to help them make the playing field equal? While also, like, you want to open it up, say we got to make it fair for everybody, but it sucks when we know we're making it fair for everybody, but some people are already cheating. Like, so it's tough, man. It's a really tough debate. It's a really tough discussion. I see the merits, even in some of the other stuff where like I said, I see people saying, "Oh, they don't deserve it." I see some of the merits in some of those arguments. I think some of those arguments are short-sighted and they're not fully informed. But I see the merits and what they're trying to say. But at the same time, I see on the other side, like where it is beneficial to help people. And I will say, just as one of my favorite, it was always a thought experiment for years. What if we ended the war on drugs? Like, what if we just took all the money that was used to militarize the police and put it into treatment or therapy or whatever? That was a thought experiment in around the world, but especially in the U.S. and in the U.K. for a long time. And then in 2000, and I tell people this all the time. It's amazing. A lot of people still don't know this, and it's 20 something years later. But I started telling people this story like in 2008, 2009, and people were like, "Oh, that's a bunch of bullshit. That's not real." And then they would go look it up. In 2000, Portugal decided they had a war on drugs that was just as action heavy, guns and violence and police with military gear and tanks and the whole deal, just like us. They followed the same blueprint as us. They literally said they were following the American blueprint: militarized police, AR-15s, body armor, armor personnel carriers, the whole deal, raiding drug spots and all that stuff because they had a major drug problem, just like with their hair, opiates and stuff. And they were losing the war on drugs, much like we are, and they said,
Yeah.
"We're done. We are not funding this anymore. All this money that we got approved to buy all this gear for police, and society's gotten more and more authoritarian and more
Yeah.
politish. We're cutting it off. We're turning all that money into free treatment if you want to get help, free mental health therapy, free family counseling, all this stuff, job help, vocational rehab to learn how to a job skill. Like they poured all the money into social programs, and drug crime fell off a cliff. It just drug
Right.
crime, new drug use, young people getting addicted to drugs, all of it just like declined almost overnight. Like because what happened, the other thing was they spent a lot of money and time. Anybody who went to therapy and said, "Hey, I have a drug problem," it was all free. Inpatient, everything was free. Like here, you got to have insurance, and it's in crazy expensive. All this, so it was free. They got treatment, and in treatment, they got reconnected with their families because so many of the opiate addiction, especially opiate and crack and stuff, people lose their families. They contacted people's families, brought them in, did family therapy, all free. Contacted their former or current workplace that they were on the verge of losing a job, or help them get their job back. Talked to the employer, said, "Look, this is what this is what Grant needs. He's going to need to, he needs to work. He's going to once he gets out of here, we want him to work, but we also want him to come to at least half a day of therapy for the next 3 months, and then after that, he needs to come to therapy once a week." And it was like, can you accommodate this schedule and allow him to keep his job because he's going to need the money? And they talked to employers, they talked to direct supervisors, they talked to family, got everybody on board with a holistic treatment plan. And like it was revolutionary, and it's worked, and it's held for 22 years.
Yeah.
It's still working. And people there know, and they decriminalized all the drugs. That's the other thing. They also made everything legal. They didn't necessarily make it legal, but they won't arrest you for any drug. So you're not in jail. So they emptied out their jails too. Again, so they could pour more money instead of paying for people to be in jail and doing nothing. They paid for people to go to, which helped their workforce because then people were getting out of therapy and going back to work. Like, so it was beautiful. Again, like the findings have been wonderful. Like it's a beautiful project and it's worked. And I'm still shocked that more countries have not tried this. And again, Portugal's a homogenous society. It's much smaller than the U.S. I get it, but I don't know.
But that goes back to you could do that in a state or two,
yep.
And start small and see what happens.
Yep.
I mean, trust me, Pennsylvania is a perfect state because of all the drug, issues you have in Philadelphia and a lot of the cities.
Maryland has yeah, and it's a smaller state. Yeah. I mean, but again, that requires taxpayers' money going to social programs and upping of health benefits and upping of Social Security and upping of Medicaid, all these things, right? And you have
listen. I'm not like I know that they're talking about we're going to repeal the IRS and repeal taxes. I truly believe in a flat tax, and I think that corporations need to be a part of that. Forget all the write-offs. I get that the corporations employ all of us, but a flat tax for everybody. Listen, I'm okay if theirs is lower. If mine's 10% and theirs is 5% because they're employing everybody. Right now, most of these people are paying 0. So I mean, 5% is better than nothing. But I think that they need to make it easier.
I think it should be flat, and I say it for this reason. If nothing else, if not even more for corporations, but I'm fine with the flat tax. The problem I have is the corporations are any LLC is a corporation, so you have, but you have big and small corporations, and one of the slick things they do, even if it's a small corporation, the CEO who may be doing all the work, may be the corporation himself, can get a write-off as both an individual and as a corporation. So basically, not only is he not double, one for the business, one for himself, he's paying basically a negative. He's a net negative to society. But even big corporations like GE as a corporation pays
Yeah.
zero, and GE's CEO and CFO and um, all the presidents and vice presidents and all these higher end positions because of the amount of money they have and the connections they have and the write offs they get, they're also paying nothing. So not only
Yeah.
is the corporation itself, which is making hundreds of billions of dollars, not paying
Yeah.
anything, but the individuals at the top who are almost billionaires themselves, if not billionaires, are also paying nothing. Like,
Right.
not paying anything until you get to the middle level worker.
Yep.
That's the problem. Like the person who, like, so if we got all that money back at a flat tax rate, which if you made it across the board 5% for everybody, I think
Right.
10%, but if you made it 5% for everybody, we still make more money in taxes than what we're getting now.
Correct.
You 5% and no cuts, no breaks, no wiggle room, and get rid of income tax or get rid of consumption taxes and still be up more than what we're making now and make it easier to file taxes. Like there's so many better ways to do it than what we're doing now.
Yep.
But again, the same people who want to cut Social Security and cut Medicaid and cut all these and get rid of the IRS, or the reason they're doing it is they're trying to protect their own money.
Yeah.
And their buddies. They're protecting their buddies. They're protecting their rich friends. Like, and that's just the reality. And people are like, "Oh, it sounds political," but that's honestly like they've all but admitted that. Like that's the reality of what the reason they're doing this. So, um,
And listen, this is the larger corporations that have been able to get around the system.
yep,
They don't want to pay taxes. And listen, most of them that owe taxes, I mean, you can go to what's his name? Warren Buffett is like I think he's claiming his taxes for like 17, 18 right now.
yeah,
Where you and I, if we didn't claim our taxes, we'd lose our house, we'd go to
we'd be in jail.
jail.
Yeah,
Yeah, like, but them, I mean, they have so much money. I mean, it's just like, all right, you just pay us whenever you pay us.
yeah,
It's just a different standard.
yeah. Bezos. Who knows what country Musk is even pretending he's a citizen of at this point? Um, so those guys, what are they paying, if anything?
Pretty much nothing.
Yeah, the Gates
I mean,
family.
well, yeah, I mean, all their foundations and
Well, that's the
everything
way
else.
they set up a
Yeah,
foundation and donate to it, and so it becomes a write off.
yeah.
Yeah, man. And so again, that's where a social contract. Even if you're a billionaire, even if you're wealthier than God Himself, as part of the social contract, should you be contributing back to society in some way beyond just creating jobs?
Right.
Because the reason you're creating jobs is to benefit your own wealth and to create more wealth for yourself. So that I get it that you are helping society in a way, but the reality is you're only doing it because it generates more money for you. So part of that contribution to society is if everybody's got to pay taxes, that means you don't get a write off. Or
Listen, I mean, I'm okay with not getting a write off.
What's that?
I said, I mean, we all try to get income tax refunds and everything else,
Yeah,
but I would be okay, like you said, if it's a straight 5% and that's
yeah.
what I pay and that's it, I'm okay with that
Dude,
because you still have more money in your pocket every day.
I got a better one for people who are like, I don't want to contribute to this. My taxes going to whatever topic they're mad about this week. That they don't want their taxes on the government to pay for that. Fine. Mandatorily, you have to almost like a tithe, like if you were in church, but you have to set aside 5% of your income over the course of the year, 10%, whatever the number is, that at the end of the year, you donate to a charity of your choice.
Right.
Or you get to donate, say it's 10%, you can donate 6-7% to a charity of your choice because people are going to do, people are going to donate to church or whatever. That's fine. I don't think that's the word to go, but because some of these churches are doing shady stuff too. But anyway,
Yeah.
but that's their choice. But then the other 3-4% goes to whether it's some kind of social safety net program, food or health care or social or retirement benefits or whatever. Like, but again, like you'll still get some choice on where part of your money goes, and then the other bit goes to a good cause. It doesn't go to the, doesn't go to war, doesn't go to whatever.
Right.
So I mean, again, there are a million better ways to do it. Like we're just throwing ideas out off the top of our head. There's tons of better ways to do this than what we have. But I think on some level, we all should contribute to helping our fellows. I think that's also part of our social contract. Basically, it's don't try to hurt other people mentally or physically. Don't try to beat people down or bring them down, and try to do something to help your fellow man. That's what I think generally it should be.
I think that's a good close right there.
Yeah,
I agree. All right. Well, hey, good night, everybody. Appreciate you listening to our show, and hit the like button, hit the bell, notification bell, and thank you. Have a good night.
Have a good night.